Hello and welcome back. My name is Allison and I like to watch horror movies. I also like to rant about them, and the movie that we are ranting about today is going to be The Night House, released in 2020, directed by David Bruckner. If you are new here, what we do on this channel is we talk about the entire plot of the movie. So consider this your spoiler warning. If that's not something that you want to hear about, you can click the timestamp down below and go straight to my review and thoughts on the movie rather than the plot. Totally fine. Otherwise, buckle in because this movie has a lot going on in it, and I am sure that I will miss a bunch of stuff anyways. So let's dive in. The Night House is a supernatural psychological horror film. As someone that likes psychological horror films probably more than I like slashers like Scream 1, this is a claim that I take very seriously. When something has this, I'm like really critical of psychological horror films because I watch a lot of them. But The Night House really lives up to its name and captures exactly what those genre tags promise the audience. So let's get into it. The movie actually opens up with the main character Beth having just lost her husband Owen to suicide. The opening scene is actually her being like dropped off at her front door or seeing off like some last visitor, and then she comes inside. The very first important thing that happens is that we see her struggling to sleep that night. She's in her bed by herself. She's sort of looking at the place where her husband should have been. And she's having weird dreams, like hearing noises throughout the house, walking around. And then we see her wake up on the floor. At first, I thought it was a conscious decision for her to sleep on the floor, and I wouldn't blame her. I find this scene to be fairly relatable. The house has a lot of memories. The bed has a lot of memories. Her husband's not there anymore. She's grieving. She's sad. I could see myself deciding to sleep on the floor. But when she wakes up, her facial expression and body language don't paint the picture that she decided to sleep there. She looks a little bit confused. She looks really stiff. She looks like she had a long night. And she pulls herself off the floor and then like gets ready to work and goes outside. Rather than getting straight in her vehicle, what she does is she goes down these like long windy stairs down to a dock and a boat, because like of course the house is on a cliff and a lake house. It wouldn't be a good horror film if it wasn't on a lake house, right? At the bottom of the stairs is a dock, and she sees these like wet, sort of muddy footprints, and she's staring at the footprints on the dock, and she's staring at the boat, which, by the way, the boat is the place where her husband committed suicide. He took it out onto the lake, and so that's the thing that she's staring at, is this boat. While she's staring at it, and who knows what thoughts are going through her head. I can only imagine. Like, I can make guesses, but we don't actually know. We don't get told that. We hear a gunshot, and the gunshot, of course, startles the audience because it's a sudden loud sound, and it startles the main character, Beth, and it startles a bunch of birds that come out of the trees. I assumed when they're showing the birds come out of the trees that they were gonna have her like try to go explore, because all the birds came from like a single point upwards, and I thought, we're gonna go see what's at that point. We're gonna go see who made that gunshot. But no, we don't go see who shot the gun. Instead, she stares at the lake and stares at the trees and stares at the air for a while, and then that's it. She goes to work. When she gets there, we are sat in, it's like a lecture of some sort, like maybe a meeting, maybe a continued education, but we only get like 2 seconds of it. She sits down next to her coworker, and her coworker's like, I didn't expect you here, and she's like, I can't be at home anymore, which, again, understandable. I wouldn't want to be home alone, sitting in my grief in that situation either, so I get it. The person like speaking at the front, like 2 seconds later, less than a minute, dismisses everyone to go on like a lunch break. We don't see the rest of this. Instead, we see her in her classroom because she's a teacher, and she's sitting at her desk, looking at her laptop, and there is, she's looking at like house listings and for sale, and she glances over at a picture of her late husband and then sort of looks at the time, and we see her eyes start to droop, and she's like clearly getting really sleepy, and they close all the way, and then they bounce back open, and we look back at the clock, and it's been like an hour or something. Not only that, but the screen, the like website on her laptop screen is no longer houses for sale. It is guns. And that's all we see. She closes it really quick because there is a parent. There's a parent walking into her classroom. This mother, says that she's there to talk about her kid's grade. And the school year has ended, basically. So this parent comes in, says she needs to talk about a grade, and takes a seat in front of Beth's desk. What they start talking about is some speech that her son got a 0 on that he was supposed to have given in class, and they come to the conclusion that the day he was supposed to make it up was the day that Beth wasn't there. And Beth looks at the parent, and she's like, I had personal matters that day. I was not there. And the parent sort of balks at her, and she's like, we all have personal matters. That's why my son was not there the day that he was supposed to give the speech. And you can tell at this point that Beth is like already done with all of this. She doesn't want to deal with it. So she says, we'll just pretend that grade doesn't count for him, and we will give him a B instead of a C, because his grade was only a C instead of like perfect, I guess. Anyways, the parent is like, no, that's not what I wanted. That's not the problem. And she's like, I feel like wanting to get into a confrontation. She just wants to have the fight if the grade is not the thing. And she is pushing that like her son wanted to be there to do it. Everyone has personal matters. That's not the principle of the thing. And so Beth looks at her like in the face with a straight face. And mind you, before I say this, when I was looking to sort of bullet point all of this out, other places don't mention the scene at all. Like, it's not important to them. But I felt like it was, because I just really enjoyed the scene. I felt like it was really good for character building. I felt like it was really good for information giving to the audience. And I feel like it starts already to set the tone for the movie. So Beth looks at this parent and she says, my husband committed suicide. She's like, my husband went out on a boat and took a gun to his mouth. And the whole vibe that we get from Beth while she's confronting this parent here is, I do not give a single crap anymore. What are we even doing here? What is the point? Why are you accosting me when I just lost someone, when I just went to a funeral, when I'm only here to like save my own sanity? What else do you want besides me to change the grade? And she's like, what, do you want an A? And the teacher balks again. She doesn't know what to say. She's really surprised. Of course, I like confronted with that information in that matter. I totally get it. So they settle on a B, and that is the end of that. What we see after this is more of Beth feeling weird in her house, which again, I totally relate to this. I would feel weird in that house too. That night, she has more weird dreams. She falls asleep in her bed, where her husband used to be, but her husband is not anymore. We see her wake up to really loud noise. There's like music blaring that should not be blaring. And she gets a text on her phone. She looks at her phone. The text is from Owen, which, in case you forget, Owen is her deceased husband. She has a text from Owen, and it's like, come down, don't be afraid. She's asking, who is this? And he's saying it's Owen. And you can see on her face, like, of course it's not Owen. What the heck is going on? So she picks her phone up, makes a phone call and puts it to her ear, and the phone connects. And I just would like to take a moment, friends, viewers, audience members, women in horror movies, everyone, don't call the ghosts. Don't do it. Nothing good happens when we do this. So if we could learn our lesson and stop calling the ghosts, that would be great. Thanks. Anyways, she calls, something picks up, nothing really comes of it. She wakes up the next day in the bathroom with like a blanket and a pillow. That's where she slept that night. And this time she looks even more confused than she did when she woke up in her bedroom. So you can kind of tell, like, she didn't, even if she meant to sleep on the floor, she probably didn't necessarily mean to sleep in the bathroom floor. Seems like an odd choice. What she does after this is she goes and checks her phone to see if that really happened. Did I really text Owen? Did he really call me? Is his presence here? Is it him I'm hearing? Is it him I'm feeling? The texts aren't there and the phone calls aren't there. So what she does after that is she goes to look at his cell phone that she has. And apparently it's like the first time she's looked at it since all of this happened. I don't have a timeline for when he did the act to where we're at now. They don't really tell us that, but I don't think it's been very long. I think it's like quick, you know. So she looks at his phone, and his phone doesn't show the phone call either. His phone doesn't show the text messages either. So what does she do? She decides to look through his other messages and his phone pictures. What she finds in his pictures is a picture of a woman, a thin white woman with long brown hair that looks very much like Beth. And when I saw this part, I was thinking that's a picture of her, right? I was convinced that it was a picture of her, but Beth is not convinced that it's a picture of her. She is convinced that it's a picture of someone else. And so she goes to work, I guess. She goes to her best friend's house. And she is talking about this picture, and she is sort of ranting and rambling about the fact that this picture is not her. She doesn't own a shirt like that. She doesn't know where it was taken. And she's having some weird feelings, and her friend is sort of blowing her off and not letting her talk about it. Her friend is telling her to leave it alone. Her friend is telling her to let it all go. Don't go through his stuff. Don't do any of that. Remember Owen the way you remembered him, and just drop it. Just get rid of all of it and move on. And I don't know about you guys, but I'm too nosy for that. I side with Beth on this. I'd want to see everything. I would want to hurt my own feelings. That's just me. Anyways, the main character's best friend invites Beth out to have drinks with the best friend and 2 other coworkers. So they go do that night, and after they've had, we cut from like the scene where they're talking about the phone and the pictures and all of that stuff. And we come right to where they've had a few drinks. And you can tell right away that Beth has probably had one too many drinks. She's had one too many whiskey sours or whatever she's drinking. I don't actually know. She rambles about like brandy later on as something that Owen liked and left a lot of behind, but that's really like the only explanation we get for what she might be drinking. While they're at the bar though, Beth is one too many drinks in, and she clearly has had enough of like regular conversation and decides that she is going to start unloading what is on her brain. She asks them, do you guys believe in ghosts? Do you believe in presences? And from this, she starts talking about what has happened. And her best friend already is like, I don't really want to talk about this. About like the weird stuff that's going on in your life. About like the weird grief you're feeling. Anyways, the not best friend, the other 2 characters, the other woman and this dude that they're with, they start asking Beth questions. Like, are you sleepwalking? Like, is there this and this going on? And Beth is trying to explain to them, I've never been a sleepwalker. My husband started sleepwalking one day randomly, but he didn't before that either. He was never the one that had depression. She was always the one that had depression, and she says it was always me that had the darkness, and he was the only thing that kept it at bay. And she muses in this moment if her depression was not the thing that eventually got to him, rather than like sleepwalking being contagious. She says, I wonder if it was too much in the end, and that my darkness finally infected him. Again, the best friend sort of tries to shush her. The other woman that's there asks about a suicide note. And everyone is ready to just like shut this conversation down. But Beth pulls a note out of her purse. She says, yes, there was a note. It's an envelope. And they lay the envelope on the table. And there's like a spot of a red. Which like, I don't know, necessary, sanitary. I'm not going to be the judge of that. Anyways, she opens it and she reads it. And the note says, you were right. There is nothing. Nothing is after you. You are safe now. And the note having this specific wording is really, really important later. I love this section of the movie. Not in a big, like it's the best scene way, but just the wording of the note and being able to sort of see it once we come back around to it. Like, at the end, you'll see. It's a very lovely, large breadcrumb. The best friend, again, is like, I'm done with this conversation. And she is shushing Beth. And she's like, it's time for you to go home. And if that feels sort of rude to you, I mean, it does. It feels... Here's the thing. This happens in real life. People don't like to hear about when people get sick and when people are dying and when people die. They don't like to hear about like the grief and the sadness and all of the weird things that come along with that. They don't like to let you talk. This is something that I have seen play out in real life. It is a real scenario. And I think that in regards to the movie, it lends a lot to sort of why she makes the solo decisions that she makes as the movie plays forward. She has already heard from her best friends and from her coworkers that they think she's thinking too much, that they don't really want to hear about it, that none of this matters. But to Beth, it matters. Anyways, after this scene with the note, the best friend insists on driving Beth home, so that's what they do. When they get there, Beth pours herself another drink because she's not done, right? I think this is where she goes on this little speech about brandy, trying to finish a bottle of brandy, but she hasn't acquired the taste for it yet. Her best friend refuses the drink, and they sit on the couch, and Beth just sort of starts talking, right? She says, I lied about not knowing what the suicide note means. I know exactly what it means. She starts talking about an accident that she had several years ago where her like lungs got like punctured, and she ended up in the hospital, and she technically died for like 6 minutes or something while this event was happening. And she said, while she was dead, she says, people like to ask me all the time what I saw, and I wish I could tell them something. Sometimes I lie about it, but I saw nothing. There is nothing. And she explains that this was like sort of a point of contention between her and Owen, not like in a fight way, but he spent a lot of time trying to convince her that she was wrong, that there was only nothing. There was more than nothing after death. And she's sort of reminiscing about all of this, and then she convinces her best friend that she doesn't want her to stay over and falls asleep on the couch. That night, while Beth is asleep on the couch by herself, she's woken up to very loud music. Most of the things that have woken her up since the death of Owen has basically been music or like really loud phone noises. There hasn't been anything super physical. It's not even like loud bangs. It's mostly been like electronics turning on. So this night is no different. The music turns on and she jumps off of the couch, and the music kind of turns off after a minute, and it is blaring loud, right? I had to turn my sound down. It was so loud. But Beth is like kind of pissed off a little bit at this point. She's a little bit riled up, and she's like, show yourself. Like, tell me whatever it is you have to tell me. Do something to show me that you're here rather than just making music play. She hears some sort of sound outside, and she goes outside. And I need to stop for another moment. The bad thing is almost always outside. Yeah, the killer is outside. The ghosts are like outside, or they're gonna do something fucked up when you come back inside. Don't just like stay inside. Go back up to your bed, right? Like, stop calling ghosts and stop following things outside. Anyways, she goes outside. What happens while we're outside is she's looking around into like the woods, because not only do they live on a lake house on top of a cliff, they also live near a bunch of woods and trees, because of course they do, right? I feel. While outside, a bunch of women start like running by, a bunch of like sort of ghostly appearing out of nowhere women, and they're like yelling and telling her to run and making a bunch of noises. They run past her and they're like jumping over the edge of the cliff. And Beth goes to investigate the cliff. And if you're thinking, well, maybe it's just a small cliff, or maybe it's... No, they're like jumping over a fence, and on the other side is a sheer drop to water. They're like bypassing the windy stairs I mentioned earlier. Anyways, if you think that she's gonna jump with them, she's not. She doesn't. What she does do is she goes down those windy stairs that I just mentioned, and she goes down to that little dock I talked about. And on the dock this time, instead of like muddy footprints or wet footprints, there is bloody footprints coming from the dock, or coming from the boat. And there's like stacked folded clothes on the bench of the boat. And these are clothes that earlier in the movie we know were like from Owen's clothes. So she recognizes the clothes, and she is like convinced that there's something there with her. She's convinced that Owen is there with her, if you haven't caught on to that by now. And she really wants him to just sort of prove it, to just get it done with already. And so she's trying to talk to him. And in this scene, she actually does feel a presence. And it sort of caresses her and then sort of picks her up and puts her in this boat and like shoves her off into the water. And I have two things here. One, this scene where she is in the boat sort of floating on the lake by herself. It is a beautiful scene. It is an absolutely gorgeous scene. The water is dark and ripply. There is a bright red moon up in the sky that is like shining red light over parts of her body. The red moon in this scene is gorgeous. I loved it. I made like 3 notes on my phone while I was watching this movie, because I knew at this point I wanted to talk about it. And the red moon was something I mentioned specifically, how pretty it was and how interesting it was and how much I enjoyed it. And it does come back later too, which I enjoy that as well. The other thing though is that like, I don't know, stop calling ghosts. Stop going outside, because that's where the scary things are. And like dark water, I could not be out on that water when like it's pitch black. I just, no thank you. Anyways, so Beth comes to on the other side of the lake in this small little boat, and she gets herself out of the boat onto dry land, despite it being like dark and in a place that she's never really been. For me, I would have ended up in the water, but she's not me. Maybe there's like something special about living near a lake and that you're more used to how the land is. I don't know. Anyways, She gets up on shore, and what she sees on the other side of the lake, on the land there, is this big lit up house. And it's not just any house, right? It is a like reverse mirror image of her house that's on the opposite side of the lake, right? One thing that I didn't cover before, but provides additional context here, is that in the previous scenes, during the daytime and leading up to nighttime, where she's like having these weird dreams, Beth is actually packing up all of Owen's stuff. She packs up like all of his shirts and a bunch of his stuff throughout the house. She packs up some of their pictures together, and she goes downstairs to the basement, which is like his office. And Owen is actually an architect, so he has a lot of like building blueprint type stuff laying around. I don't know the words for it because I am not an architect. That is not my job. This is more my thing. But one thing that she goes through on screen is this like big sketchbook. It's a fat sketchbook. And there's like an engraving of some sort in it. It was a gift from Beth to Owen. And she's flipping through the pages, and it's like a blueprint, some sort of house plan, something else. It's all like architect blueprint type stuff. And then she comes to a page where it's a layout of, if the book is like this, there's a layout of her house on this side. And then on the other side is something, it says like reverse blueprint or like reverse floor plan. And it is the reverse of their house. And there's this weird like transparent page sort of in between them. And Beth spends a few minutes looking at this, like with a confused look on her face. She's not sure what it is. And eventually she decides that it's not important. It doesn't matter. She's not going to like go through with this craziness, because there's like some other weird stuff. His drawings go from like normal to like they start getting a little weird, and like there's weirder stuff in them. But she's done with that. She closes that book, she slams it shut, and she throws it in a box with a bunch of other stuff, and then moves on. She's packing in a way that like is angry and frustrated and in a hurry, because she wants to be done with all of it and move out of the house. And again, I can't blame her. I wouldn't want to still be there either. I would want to be finding a place to move to. So that was her goal. So now she's at the reverse house, so to speak. What she sees in these windows is Owen with ladies, and it's like they're described as like ghostly women in the like Wikipedia and stuff. I didn't really view it as ghostly, but I think we understand that these things probably aren't actually happening, right? But she's looking up there, and like he's in a bunch of different rooms, and there's like other women there, and she's having a moment. So confused by what she's looking at, she tries to go inside the house. She approaches the door, and on the door, and it's like lit up because her front door is also mostly glass, by the way. I, again, could not. I would not want a house that had a glass door, like much less all the glass that she has around it. But specifically the door, I need like some privacy somewhere. I would not be appropriate in front of that door all the time, and that would be a problem. Anyway, she comes up to the door, and the numbers like across the top are reversed as well. And not just like they're backwards, right? And she tries to walk through the door, but when she walks through the door of the reverse house, she doesn't walk into the reverse house. She actually finds herself walking into her front door, and she's looking around confused because she's staring at her own living room. She is looking at herself asleep on her couch. This like realization startles her awake. She wakes up with a jolt and goes over and closes the door. And I feel like there's a moment here where you'd be like, what the F did I see, right? But she remains, I feel like, as calm as she could in this situation. She goes and closes the door and like locks it and takes care of all of that stuff. We skip to when it's light out again. When it's daytime, she goes out and she's trying to find this reverse house that she saw the night before. She knows that she saw it like clear as day, even though in a lot of the previous scenes, we haven't seen it. you can tell that she's not really sure of like where it should be, despite having just been there, because one of her neighbors she finds in the woods, and she starts asking him like, hey, do you know where this house is that looks like mine? It's over here somewhere. And the dude's like, I have no idea what you're talking about. I think that maybe your grief has you not quite okay in the head. This is a theme that like everyone around her is sort of treating her like, what, you have weird thoughts, your grief, I'm worried about you, you're not okay, you can't be alone. Anyway, she blows him off and she's like, I'll come by later and like check in and spend some time with people. And she keeps searching. She does find a house that is sort of the reverse of her house, but it's not finished. It's not lit up with like glass and stuff. It is mostly just the bones of the house. There's a lot of tarps, a lot of raw wood, a lot of like stuff on the ground. This is what she finds, and then she goes inside and she's looking around, obviously and understandably confused about what she's looking at. And she hears noises upstairs. I would not be trying to get to the upstairs of this house. I would not trust whatever these stairs are, but she has a lot of faith in them. She's like calling out, is anyone here? Hello, what's up there? And she goes up the stairs like a mad woman, having no idea if the stairs are stable at all. She goes up there and she finds like a paper bag. And so of course, not knowing what it is or who left it there, she reaches in and pulls out this like statue. The statue is of a woman that's been like folded sort of backwards in half and tied, and there's a lot of like weird like metal pole sticking through various parts of it, and she flips out. After she finds this, the next thing that Beth does is she goes and confronts this neighbor that she was talking to. She goes over to his house and she's like yelling at him like, what is this? What is this? And of course, this dude has no idea what this is. He doesn't know what that house is. He doesn't know it exists. He's just some dude that like lives somewhere nearby. We don't have like a good sense of where he lives or why he's close to her. Just that like he happens to be in the vicinity kind of throughout the movie. What he does tell her though is that there was one day where he saw Owen walking through those parts of the woods where he had stopped her earlier with another woman that looked kind of like Beth, and he never told anyone. But what also happened was that later on that day, Owen comes to his door covered in mud. His clothes are disheveled. He's not looking very good. And Owen is telling this dude about these like urges that he's been having and how there's this like dark sort of thing hovering over him. And my dude, I have questions. Like he admits that he's like, I know how it looks now. Well, it should have looked that way then too. You should have been asking more questions. You should have been telling people. Honestly. Anyways. We do not get an elaboration from that. That is all we get about like the urges and the being covered in mud. But Beth is now on a mission. She has a lot of things going through her head. She has found this like half-built house. She's seen the pictures on his phone. She has found this statue and talked to the neighbor. And all this stuff is like swirling. So she goes back home and she goes back to his office and she's like rummaging through his stuff. She's looking, tearing through the boxes. And in my mind, she's looking for that sketchbook that has the like reverse floor plan. That is the thing that I want her to find in all of those boxes. I'm like, yes, find the reverse layout, figure out what that's about, tell me like what's in there. But she does not find that. She's blowing through box after box after box, and this sketchbook is nowhere to be found. What she does find though is 2 other books that are like occult books. Well, she finds a handful of things, but these are the 2 most important. They're like occult books that you can tell by her facial expression are not the sort of thing that they would normally have around. And in fact, these are like hidden in his office. So it's not like they're out and about things that they are talking about and discussing. Find though is a logo and name of a bookstore. So she looks up where it's at and she makes her way down there. While there, she tries to hound like the person at the register for information, but the guy can't tell her much and starts looking up something by like the author or something, I don't know, of those books. She spots something out of the corner of her eye, and what it looks like she spots is the background to the photo that she found on Owen's phone after that dream where like she tried to call him at nighttime. So she wanders back that way and she finds a woman back there that is the woman from the picture. And Beth sort of confronts her and starts like asking her questions about how this woman knew her husband and that he's gone and blah, blah, blah. She's trying to ascertain what happened between them. She's convinced at this point that Owen had an affair. The woman is very adamant that she did know him, that they like did hang out a few times, but they never slept together. Beth is not really having this. She's not really sure what to believe. And we see her that night at dinner with her best friend and her best friend's family. And she's like ranting about this woman and cussing a lot. And my thought, I'm like, why is no one being like, yo, ma'am, you need to quiet your voice? There's like kids at the dinner table. I guess it's not really important though. In like the grand scheme of things in this movie, the cursing with kids nearby was not the biggest deal. But she's telling her best friend about this woman and confronting her, and she's giving her like some extra information. And again, her best friend is like shutting her down. She does not want to hear about it. She's telling Beth that she really needs to stop going through her stuff. She needs to just get a grip, stay somewhere else for a few days, get out of the house. And I don't think that on this, the best friend is wrong for that. I think that probably Beth could use a few days out of that house. I think that she could go somewhere, get a night of sleep, and maybe come back with fresh eyes and see that the things happening are really weird. In like ways that I don't think she's comprehending at that time. Beth decides to even though I do think that her best friend has a point about staying somewhere else, this is another one of those points where I'd like to stop though and like talk about the isolation that Beth is probably feeling. Every step of her journey with grief, she's finding these weird things. There's a lot of crazy stuff happening and she's having a lot of feelings, and she probably feels crazy. She probably feels like she's losing her mind. She understands how it sounds, but she's also full of grief. She just lost her husband, and what she needs is some closure and some comfort and someone to listen, and her friend is not doing that. So what Beth is forced to do is find somewhere else to find that closure and to find that comfort. And where is she finding those things? Where she's hoping and searching to find those things is in his things, is following this journey that she has started down. If she can prove that like her Owen was really still her Owen, or figure out what he was up to, maybe she could relax. That is the state of mind that she is in, and no one around her is really seeing that or really understanding and listening to that. And I think that that affects Beth just as much as like the feelings on their own. So at the end of the scene, we do see Beth agree that maybe she should stay somewhere else, at least for a night or two. And she tells her best friend that she's going to go home and pack, and that she will be back. So Beth goes back to her house, and she's drinking again. She's been drinking a lot throughout this movie, and she tries to start packing up some more, but she starts hearing noises again. And she's, again, shouting to her house, like, show me a sign if you're here, Owen. Because she's absolutely convinced that the thing that she is seeing or hearing is Owen. There is a sound that comes from outside. And, of course, Beth is like, let's go investigate. She opens the front door, but there's not a presence there. There's not a ghost there. Instead, there's this woman, Madeline, who's the woman from Owen's picture on his phone. She's the woman from the bookstore that we saw Beth confront. She's standing there and she's like, I'd like to talk. Madeline comes inside the house and her and Beth get into a conversation about how far things went. And she's like, I want to say, even though I'm here, I absolutely did not sleep with your husband. But Beth is confused, right? She's like, I'm not sure I believe you anyways, but how do you know where I live if you never did anything? And Madeline says, well, he did invite me up here. After they've had like some coffee dates and stuff like that, Owen invites Madeline up to the house. They spend a few minutes there, but rather than anything progressing, he actually shows her the reverse house, and not the like big full done one. Madeline gets taken to the like sort of halfway done house that Beth found the other night after getting off the boat. They go inside this like half finished house with the tarps and raw floor and all. And they go up the stairs, which, like, I guess are safe, but still, like, these would skeeve me out. And after a few moments, he kisses her. And Madeline tells Beth, basically, that Owen puts his hand on her throat and sort of tries to choke her. And Madeline says that he wasn't, like, super rough about it. He wasn't, like, aggressive. But Madeline freaked out and told him to stop, and he did. After that, they sort of panicked and they left the reverse house and came back to the regular house. Madeline like panics and drives home, and that was that, right? But she also tells Beth that Owen told this woman that he needs to end it, like once and for all. He needs to be done with it. Madeline says, I don't know what he meant by that. And Beth has a lot of questions, like end the affair and having affairs and something else, but there are no answers in that moment. There's no explanation. So Madeline leaves, and rather than go to her best friend's house, like she said she would, like she probably does need to do a little bit, Beth doesn't do that. Beth goes instead back across the lake to the reverse house. While she's there, she's like roaming around this reverse house, yelling out for like Owen or the presence and trying to make sense of it all, when her foot cracks through a floorboard. Underneath the floorboard, she makes a gruesome discovery. What she finds is that there is bag after bag after bag of corpses. Women's corpses are just covering the like crawl space underneath this floorboard, and Beth panics, rightfully so, and she runs home. Mind you, throughout this movie, there's something happening that is kind of difficult to capture in text and just sort of verbally in the way I'm describing the movie. Know this. And that is that, yes, Beth is hearing like footsteps and she's hearing knocks around the house. She's hearing this music turn on suddenly and having dreams about phone calls. But also she's seeing things, and she's not seeing like apparitions. She's not seeing like ghosts or monsters or just like her husband. What Beth is seeing is shadows in like the structures themselves. So there will be like a pillar that has a carve in it, and the shadow in that carve will make like a face and like a body going down, or like a shadowy reflection that's really just like the doorway behind it and things like that. It's making it harder for her to face reality as she goes through this, because those shadows that she's seeing in like the structures of her houses and other places, it's creating the form of a man. So in her mind, she is seeing the presence of Owen. And now she is flipping out because she's seeing these horrible things. And it's just becoming, everything is confusing. She's leaving a voicemail when she gets home. She is leaving a voicemail on her best friend's phone, and she's like seeing these things. She has found the bodies, and she is struggling to put all of the pieces together. She tells her best friend, like on the voicemail, I know what I just saw. I know what I found, but I also know my husband. I know Owen, and he would never do that. And she's like not sure really what to do. I think at that point, she was convinced that that maybe her best friend was right, that maybe she needed to just get out of the house and be done with this. But before she can do that, she sets the phone down because something distracts her. Before she can get out of the house, things escalate. At this point in the movie, as Beth is distracted, the presence is the strongest that it has ever been. It's been whispering things in her ear. It's guiding her to some of the places that she's been, telling her when things are just a dream and when they're not, so that she can like feel comfortable doing things. Here is where it really presents itself the strongest. Her and this presence sort of confront each other. She's seeing the structural shadows everywhere, and she is begging for a sign. She has taken a shower recently, and in the mirror is like written in the fog of the mirror is the word here, and she interprets that as I am here. Owen is here. So this actually has like a mixed calming effect on her. She's like, maybe I'll finally get the answers I need here, but she's also wiping it off because like this sort of thing spooks you, right? There in the bathroom, she sort of comes head to head with it, and it's like caressing her face, and it's talking to her, and she like tries to kiss it, and you know, she's like touching the invisible body, and the invisible hands are touching her, and she turns around and looks in the mirror, and it's like hugging her from behind. And in that moment, she has bliss, but only for a very brief moment. What we see in the mirror while she's facing it is Owen bashing another woman against the mirror that looks like Beth. As soon as that finishes playing out, Beth says something to the presence. She's like, Owen, that's you, right? And it whispers in her ear. It's like, no, this is not Owen. And it whaps her head on the mirror, and she kind of like passes out. What happens at this point is that Beth is basically like dragged into this sort of reverse space that she's been seeing different places. The presence has dragged her basically through the mirror into its like own world. At this point, the presence is finally being honest about what it is. The presence is nothing, and not like there is no presence, there's nothing there, but capital N, nothing. This is the nothing that Beth met when she died for like 6 minutes and saw the afterlife, and she said there's nothing there, this darkness, this blackness, this nothing. It didn't want to let her go. And it is telling her that it tried to use Owen all of this time to get her back. It's like whispering in Owen's ear that Owen needs to send her back. So it shows us clips of Owen sort of doing this and then stopping and like getting up to go do something else. What Owen was doing this entire time was, instead of hurting his wife, which is what those urges were that we talked about earlier, that he told his neighbor, I'm having all of these urges, but didn't elaborate. He's finding women that look like Beth and harming them and sending them to nothing to trick it and keep it placated. Meanwhile, all of these like occult books that he has in the statue, he's trying to find ways to like trap this nothing, this demon, this like bad presence, before the tricks don't work anymore. Owen feels like he has done enough at this point to trick nothing, to trap it, to keep his wife safe. While all of this is happening, while nothing is explaining to Beth how it was tricked for a little while and how it was trying to use Owen, she's forcefully being shown the ways that he harmed all of these women, the ways that he killed all of these women. And we're also seeing a lot of those like structural shadows going on. So Beth is being inundated with like really bad things going on, and the fact that her husband for however long now had urges to kill her, but didn't, and instead actually committed suicide rather than finish her off. At this point, we see the presence manipulate Beth again, but it's not in a mental or emotional way. It's the same way as when she was smacked into the mirror or put into the boat in those earlier scenes. The presence kind of folds her back and like ties her up, sort of similar to the way the statue is that she found in the reverse house. So there's a fair bit of sort of symbology there. Owen was trying to trap the nothing, and here's the nothing using that same form to tell Beth she is trapped as well. Beth is trapped in nothing's realm. She is not in a regular space. She is solely over there with nothing, who wants her to not be alive anymore. The scene changes after this. We don't see quite what happens next to Beth. What we see is her best friend comes over to the house, really, really worried about her. It's daytime, it's morning, this woman storms through the house. I'm assuming that Beth isn't answering her phone calls or her text messages, and that's why the woman had to come over. But, like, I do have a question here, that Beth was supposed to come back over last night, right? And it has taken you, however, I assume hours to get over there. I guess I don't know how long this whole sequence of events has taken, but I would think maybe you'd be concerned just a little bit earlier, but I don't know. Maybe that's just me. Anyways, the best friend gets into Beth's house and she sees the evidence of a fight. A lot of things are not where they're supposed to be. Things are kind of destroyed, flipped over, etc. What the best friend sees through one of the windows, because remember, this house is made of a lot of glass, is Beth in the boat where Owen had offed himself, and she's out in the water. And you can guess real easily what is going through this woman's mind. She thinks that Beth is out there to not have to be in this world anymore. What we see is that Beth is still in nothing's realms. And from Beth's point of view, she's in the boat, she's on the water, but it's nighttime with that big red moon in the air. And there's actually like a big red moon that is casting that gorgeous, lovely red light down on her and on the water. There's also a big silver moon on the sky, kind of like eyes watching down. Also, from Beth's point of view, while she's in this boat, it's not just her in there. There is Owen's form, Owen's body, as far as she can see, sitting across from her in this boat. And it's Owen's voice that she's hearing. But the thing that she's talking to is not Owen, right? Because Owen is gone. Owen's ghost is not there. Owen is not there. Owen is gone. The nothing is using Owen's form to further mess with Beth and try to get her to do what this thing wants her to do. At this point, we are kind of flipping back and forth between the nothing telling Beth that she can just get it over with. She can go stop having to grieve and live her life alone, that like the nothing is going to take her, etc. We're flopping between that and her best friend trying to get out of the house and screaming Beth's name and trying to get down those stairs and out down to the boat. We also see the neighbor that Beth talked to earlier is hearing these screams from out in the woods, and he's coming out towards her as well. We see that while still in the house, Beth's best friend does find a baggie that used to have the gun in it, but it's empty now. And we see that Beth has the gun in her lap. The nothing is trying to convince her and is starting to further manipulate her body. We see the gun kind of start to point upwards towards her. And she's trying to fight it. But remember that Beth is also grieving. She's also depressed. She's also isolated. And there's all of these things that she has laid out in front of her that she was hoping would comfort her and hoping would give her closure and would help her grieve and move on. And none of those things did any of those things. All of those things just led her to the nothing. All of those things led her to be shushed by her friends. All of those things led her further into her grief. So that is the position she's in now. And I think that from the viewpoint of her best friend, Beth was never okay. And there's, in the movie, there's never really any sort of responsibility taken for the fact that they all sort of pushed her farther by not letting her talk or like engage about it at all. But maybe that's a conversation for like a whole nother day, because it serves the purpose it's supposed to serve in this movie. It brings her to this point of utter darkness, like inside and out. Beth is a fighter, and that is shown through the whole movie. She's does not give into her fear, but in this moment, we are questioning, is it too much? But also, throughout these scenes, where even when we're in Beth's point of view, we are hearing her best friend call for her. She's hearing someone scream her name, a voice she recognizes. And that keeps her a little bit grounded in reality. It keeps her grounded enough that Beth manages to turn the gun away from her. And that sort of breaks the spell. Rather than being in this dark place in the nighttime with nothing, she is taken back to reality and like jumps out of the boat as her best friend has reached the boat, and they both swim back to the shore together. So we are at the end of the movie. We are at the place where Beth has confronted the presence. Beth has, at least for now, won. She knows what it is. She can put her husband to rest, and she can, follow through on all of these things, right? She has been saved for all intents and purposes. But once ashore, she has her best friend there, and she has her neighbor there. And she's like coughing and stuff because she was in the water. And she is staring out onto this boat, out onto the water. And her neighbor looks out and says, there's nothing there. Because he doesn't see anything. He says, there's nothing there. And Beth, looking out again, we see another one of these like structural shadows. But instead of like in a house, it's a shadow of a man on the water. But it's also playing into like the shadow of where the boat might be. Or like shadows underwater of trees. But it's the shadow of nothing. And Beth says, I know. And that is the end of the movie. And I come back to, again, the note that her husband left before he left her. Nothing is after you. You were right. There is nothing. And for the end line of the movie to also have that was just sort of a gut punch to me. And I don't know if it sets it up to have a sequel. I feel like a sequel for this movie, I don't know. I feel like it would be really difficult to have the amount of layers that this movie had, but we'll have to see what they do because it just came out in 2020, and sometimes it's hard to tell if they're just setting it up to let the audience have questions, which is something I do enjoy, or if they're setting it up to eventually come back. So we will revisit that when and if that ever happens. But now we are at the end of the movie. plot is over. So if you sat through all of that, thank you. I appreciate it. I had fun talking about it. Like I said, I probably missed a bunch of stuff. It was really difficult to sit down and get the plot jotted down for this movie because there's so much happening packed into every single scene. And so the things that I thought were important, I'm sure I missed a bunch of stuff. But I would like to move on to my review of the movie. I loved The Night House. I loved it. The second it was finished playing, I wanted to like talk about it and rant about it and watch it again. I usually like to watch movies, like eventually you want to rewatch a movie. This one I like wanted to have on my screen today. I wanted to have it on my screen yesterday while I was writing this. I just want to have it on again because it was a gorgeously filmed movie. It was written so well. It was directed so well. I loved every single layer of it. I didn't feel like there's any wasted time in this movie at all. I was having a conversation with someone the other day about how the setup to horror movies sometimes can be really boring. It can just be a lot of like background. And I even watched another movie the night after I watched The Night House that was like all background. It was just all like info dumping and like, here's characters. And it was really, really boring. And I feel like you could skip the first half of the movie and not miss anything. But on this one, I didn't feel like that was true. I felt like from the very first moment in the very first scene, we were seeing things that were important. We were seeing things that were building to her character, that were building to that ending, that were building to that tension at the end where we weren't sure if the gun was going to go off or turn, or if like she would give into that dark place, or if someone would be able to pull her back. And without all of that, I think the thread would have come undone without all of those layers done. And they were done so well. I loved the filming of this movie, the red moon and the reverse house and the music and the very slight jump scares, like the women rushing past her. I loved that it was music playing instead of a bunch of banging and like ghostly voices. I loved that the ghost and nothing presence were subtle and small, and the little things we expected her to do and things that I wouldn't have the guts to do, the fearlessness, the way that the character was played through the actress, everything about this movie I'm absolutely in love with. And I said at the beginning, I do watch a lot of psychological horror movies, so I feel like I do tend to be a little bit critical of them if they fit that bill and if like they were worth watching. This movie, even after knowing what's happened, like if you've sat through all of this and are not sure if you can stomach those sorts of like jump scares or like ghost movies, it's absolutely worth watching. It is, like I've said 100 times, it is a beautiful movie. That is all I've got. That is the plot of the movie and also my review of it. Again, if you've made it this far, thank you. Thank you. Thank you. I genuinely appreciate it. And I hope that you will come back for more. If you are interested in whatever movie I do next, go ahead and hit the buttons. And you can also comment down below on something that you might like me to go over. Bye.